Today we have Karl, Trellinger, and Nancy Rechcigl here highlighting mid-season poinsettia growing tips to keep you on target for premium quality finishing. Before our presenters get started, I wanted to notify you that Syngenta, as host, will record the webinar via Zoom, and the recording will be emailed out to attendees and published on our website, social media feeds after the event. No recording by anyone else or by any other means is permitted. If you'd like to ask a question, I've set the Zoom Q&A function so that you may do so privately by addressing your questions to the panelists and not to everyone. If you have questions about Syngenta's data privacy practices, please see our privacy policy, which is available at syngentaflowers-us.com/privacy-policy. Now I will hand it over to Karl Trellinger, our first presenter.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks a lot for joining. In my portion of today's webinar, I will focus on production issues that come up every year. I will not cover everything regarding production, just the key aspects. So I will talk about fertilization, growth regulation, light, and uniformity of flowering. Next slide, please. Regarding fertilization, it's really important to start feeding heavily from the beginning. We see a lot of problems when growers start feeding on the low side, especially as plants, when they're still small, don't need a lot of fertilizer. So to start feeding heavy at about 225 to 250 ppm of 20-10-20 or similar fertilizers is really important to get optimum leaf expansion and strong connections of the branches to the stem, and just overall really nice bracts expansion later on. So it starts really early. And it's really important to either go with a CalMag fertilizer from the beginning or alternate the 20-10-20 with a 13-2-13 or a 14-4-14 or something similar until the beginning of November. After that, to decrease the fertilizer to about 80 ppm nitrogen of a 14-4-14 or similar until shipping. If that is not done, then very easily the plants can get yellow leaves and don't develop as nicely. So it's really important to feed at about 80 parts until the plants are finished. The media pH should be between 5.8 and 6.2. That is really important. If the pH goes above 6.5, then it's easy for iron deficiency to appear. So it's really important to weekly check the pH in the EC. The EC should be at about 1.6 to 2.0 at a SME or pour through of 2.4 to 3. It's really important, again, to check it weekly. So it's important to get the EC up quickly to about 1.6 to 2. Molybdenum should be added as ammonium molybdate or sodium molybdate to make sure there is no molybdenum deficiency. The micronutrient package has to have elevated iron, and the iron should be at least at 1 ppm, also later in the crop, when the EC is lowered. It is very important that a complete media analysis is done every 2 to 3 weeks. I cannot overemphasize that fact. And if there are any issues, any visible problems, then tissue analysis is really important to do. Next slide, please. Fertilizer leaf burn can happen really easily early on when the plants are still fertilized overhead. So it is really important, if they're fertilized overhead, to rinse off the foliage with water, ideally combined with capsule immediately after fertilization. Next slide, please. Magnesium deficiency symptoms can appear early on, especially if the plants are propagated with too much water and there's too much leaching out of nutrients. So in the moment, a little bit of yellowing, interveinal chlorosis is seen like on the picture to the right. It's important to either have a CalMag fertilizer or to drench with magnesium sulfate at 1 to 2 pounds per 100 gallons. Next slide, please. Low nutrition symptoms. This happens very often towards the end of the crop, when the plants need a lot of fertilizer and the plants are fed just adequately. So this picture to the left shows high level of nitrogen deficiency, sulfur deficiency, magnesium, and micronutrient deficiency. So this is extreme, but it's just to point out it's really important to watch the color of the foliage. It's really important also, if you still have medium green varieties, to feed them heavier as the dark green leaf varieties. Next slide, please. Iron deficiency symptoms. We see that quite frequently, and the main reason is really if the pH goes above 6.5. So it is critical to check the pH to be between 5 and 6.2. If iron deficiency appears, then it's important to drench with iron chelate or iron sulfate. Next slide, please. Plant regulation after pinching. So after the initial forel applications, it's really important to either spray with Cycocel at 750 to 1000 ppm, or if it's really hot, with Cycocel plus B9, or Bonzi sprays. Bonzi sprays is something that can be dangerous, because if too much is sprayed or something goes into the media, then problems can appear. So it's really important to check that out first, to make good trials. If it's done properly, then it works really nice, but be extra careful. Also, Cycocel plus B9 can be a problem. So Cycocel plus B9 and Bonzi should not be applied after September 15. Next slide, please. The ideal growth regulation in October are low rate Bonzi drenches. So the rate should be between 0.05 to 0.1 ppm. And there's a chart that shows the proper volumes per pot size. That is really important. Then for more northern climates, the cumulative amount of Bonzi should be less than 0.25 ppm. For example, 0.1 ppm October 1st, another one at October 14, another one October 24th. For southern climates, the cumulative Bonzi amount can be higher, so 0.5 ppm or less. And it's important to experiment with varieties that stretch every year. Very important also to make sure the Bonzi is very uniformly applied across the crop. Next slide, please. The late season Bonzi drenches. For more northern climates, the ideal timing is about 2 to 3 weeks before finishing. And that is usually when 2 to 3 leaves are in color per bract. The rate should be between 0.5 to 1 ppm, depending on the vigor of the plant. And another thing that's really important to watch out for, after the drench, they're only going to be about 1 more inch of growth. So the application should be done 1 inch below the final height. For southern climates, the ideal Bonzi drench rate is between 1 and 2 ppm. So that's only really if it's really hot and lower rates don't work properly. The drench can be applied as early as 4 weeks before finishing. And another thing that's important is that if conditions are really hot, like in southern Florida, a Bonzi drench of 2 ppm can be applied twice. So maybe 4 weeks before finishing, and then maybe another 2 weeks before finishing. So only if needed. Next slide, please. So some variety-specific recommendations. We have several varieties that we want to track really careful this year because they're going to be very important. Serena Red is one that does exceptionally well in the heat. It doesn't heat delay. And Candy Bubblegum is a really nice hot pink color. Both are early to mid timing, so flower between November 15 and 22. So the bonsai range should be done around the beginning of November. And of course, only if needed. Then to the right, at the top, Gemma Red, and at the bottom, Draco Red. The Gemma Red has really nice upright habit, medium-sized bracts, so it's perfect for high-density production. And the Draco Red has large bracts, so ideal for the perfect retail plant. They time between November 25th and December 2nd, so the bonsai range should be done in the second week of November, not earlier. This applies to more northern conditions. In the south, it can be maybe done a week earlier than that. One thing to point out, Candy Bubblegum, Gemma, and Draco delay in the heat. So the only one of those new varieties that we really want to keep an eye on that doesn't heat delay is Serena Red. Next slide, please. Late bonsai drenches. The pictures show plants that have been drenched 5 weeks before finishing under northern conditions. So that's what can happen. So it's really important to watch out that bonsai is not applied 5 or even 6 weeks before finishing. So 2 to 3 weeks before finishing, as I said before, is really important to do under northern conditions. Next slide, please. Height control. If the plants are too short, there are several things that can be done. To raise the day temperature, of course, then to make sure the plants are not water stressed. And in general, poinsettias should never dry out. That's really important in order to maintain a healthy root system. Then a 20-10-20 with high ammonium and high phosphorus can be used for several irrigations at about 200-300 ppm, and Fascination or Fresco can be sprayed at about 1 to 3 ppm, which in general gives about 1 to 3 inches of additional growth. Next slide, please. So regarding Fascination, more vigorous varieties have a stronger response. So that's something to keep in mind. Then what's also important is that the plants are actively growing and the roots are looking really good and the fertilization is adequate. Keep in mind, once plants receive Fascination, they need a lot of fertilizer to make sure that the additional growth has sufficient nutrients available. The rates between 2 and 3 ppm are ideal. And capsule should be used as a spray adjuvant to make sure that there's good leaf coverage. What's really important with spraying Fascination is that the crop is sprayed very uniformly. So not just one side of a plant, but the plant has to get the spray from all sides. Next slide, please. So a good root system, as mentioned before, really important. Next slide, please. Fascination effect, the top picture shows no Fascination spray, so normal length of internodes. And the picture below shows stretched internodes. And the Fascination was applied at 3 ppm in that case, 10 days after the, the picture shows 10 days after the application. And the internode elongation in general stops about 2 to 3 weeks after the spray. Next slide, please. Recommended light levels. Until the middle of October, about 3,500 to 4,500 foot candles, which is about 15 to 19 moles per day. And then once the plants start showing color around the middle of October, until about 3 weeks before finishing, the light should be dropped to about 3,000 foot candles, which is about 13 moles per day. And then 3 weeks before shipping, ideally, the light should be less than 2,500 foot candles, especially the white varieties and the pink varieties. Otherwise, the pink varieties might bleach and the white varieties get more yellowish. Next slide, please. Flowering delay happens quite frequently, so it's really important to watch out for any kind of shade in the greenhouse. Next slide, please. So as you can see, the top picture, the black plastic to the side caused the green plants that are circled. Also, the same thing happened to the picture to the right with above shade not being pulled close enough. And the pictures below, a very similar issue. Next slide, please. So what happened here is that the plants had infrared heaters overhead, and the temperature of the leaves got heated up at night to about 80 degrees. So in general, it's really important to keep the leaf temperature 73 degrees or lower to make sure that doesn't happen. Okay, that was my portion. I will turn it over to Nancy Rechcigl now.
Okay, thank you, Karl. Okay, all right, very good, thank you. So let me get it in the reading view here. Okay, so one of the first problems that you may encounter on your poinsettia crop are leaf spot diseases. And we did see some of that this year. And the two that are the most common are bacterial leaf spot caused by Xanthomonas and a fungal leaf spot caused by Alternaria. They both look a bit similar, but the controls are different. So it is important to be able to tell the difference between the two. Spots caused by Xanthomonas tend to be dark brown and more angular in shape. And if you hold the leaf up towards the light or look at the underside, you may see a greasy water-soaked tissue around the margin of the lesion. You may also see some yellowing around the lesion, which is somewhat typical of bacterial diseases. Anything you can do to keep the water off the foliage will help reduce the spread. Sprays of copper-containing products such as Phyton, Camelot, Calmore, some of the biologicals like triathlon and cease, and sprays of Magnesium alone or in combination with Daconil can help prevent the spread of bacterial leaf spot. Now, in contrast, lesions caused by Alternaria tend to be more rounded in appearance with a distinct dark brown margin and often with a tan center. There is also yellowing around these lesions, so you can't just use that as a diagnostic factor. Again, keeping the foliage as dry as possible and having a program using a rotation with some of the multi-site fungicides like the dithane daconil, the 7-11 group, and like something like palladium will provide good control of Alternaria leaf spot. Now, I mentioned Phyton 27 as being an option for helping control Xanthomonas, but if you're making applications and finding that you're not getting good control, then it's likely that you may have Alternaria instead. So just keep that in mind. This trial by Ann Chase illustrates the activity of these products against Xanthomonas, and in this case, it was Xanthomonas leaf spot on ranunculus. So you can see Calmore, that's a copper. Here's a Daconil and some of the biologicals all providing some good suppression of this leaf spot. Now, Pythium root and stem rots can be problematic later in production. I know you're all familiar with the symptoms, so I'm not going to get over that, but this does tend to occur when plants are kept overly wet and oftentimes maybe later in production when you've had an irrigation, you've had a series of cloudy, perhaps cool days, and that media is not drying out. Also, high salts in the media can damage roots and allow for the entrance of these pathogens to come in. So it is important to monitor the salts. Drenching with oomycete targeted products like Subdue, Max, Truban, and Segway can be used to effectively prevent Pythium root rot problems. Now, I have this picture up here. Many growers already know this, but it's a good reminder. Adorn is a product, an oomycete product that will control Pythium as well as Phytophthora, but it does have some issues when applied to poinsettias. It can cause the leaves and the bracts to curl upwards. So that is definitely a problem. So just wanted to put that in there as a reminder. Now, routine scouting for both root and stem rots is important, and generally we do a good job monitoring the roots, but we often forget to take a close look at the stems near the soil line. And generally these stem rots will occur later in production once the plants have gained some size. And by the time the plant starts to show some signs of a problem, usually the rotting is advanced enough where fungicide treatments cannot bring that plant back. Making sure that planting or transplanting practices are done at the right level, not too deeply, because that can lead to stem rot issues. Applying a tank mix targeting oomycetes like the Pythium, Phytophthora, and Rhizoctonia can be helpful in protecting the plant from invasion by these pathogens. And you can see, you may do something like a Subdue medallion or Segway medallion, Truban or Segway mixed with Heritage as an option, or T-methyl. And then Mural also can be drenched in to provide broad spectrum disease control. Now, figuring out what type of stem rot you have is tricky, so it's always best to send samples into your local diagnostic lab. But there are some things that you can look at to see maybe what you have. And so Phytophthora, the one thing you will notice is that the brown canker, will start at the soil line and move up. It's usually dark brown with a water-soaked margin. And the canker almost looks kind of greasy in appearance. So for preventative actions, obviously discard any plants that are showing indications of this and treat the remaining group with something like Segovis, Segway, or one of the FRAC Group 40 fungicides. Segovis, if you're not aware of that fungicide, is really targeted for Phytophthora. It is systemic and really can provide some good curative control. Now, if you have Rhizoctonia, this does look a little bit different than the Phytophthora. In general, the lesion is more of a lighter brown color. It may be sunken. It may have a more dry appearance to it. So it does look a little bit different. Again, avoid transplanting too deeply, and applications with products like Medallion, the 7-11 group, and thiophanate methyl can be used to help prevent problems with Rhizoctonia. Now, if you are using thiophanate methyl application, you need to be aware of some leaf yellowing that may occur. It can be mistaken for magnesium deficiency, since you tend to see yellowing along the margins and also this kind of dark inverted V area of green tissue. This does not show up immediately like you might expect with a toxic response, and sometimes it doesn't show up at all, but we do see it on occasion, and again, oftentimes we mistake it for magnesium deficiency. Here's another slide showing picture from a late season drench of Truban plus thiophanate methyl. So just be aware that this could happen. Now, we do have some good options for Rhizoctonia control. In addition to Medallion and Heritage, Mural and other 7-11 products do work quite well. You can see this picture here. This was Mural applied at a 2-ounce rate. In addition to Rhizoctonia, Mural does offer the added benefit that it does have some good Pythium suppression with it as well as an added bonus. So here we have a slide showing some pictures from a Pythium root rot trial that we conducted on geranium. You have the non-inoculated controls here at the end, no treatment versus just mural. And then here's the inoculated set, and then the inoculated control here at the end. Here are the roots. One of the things that was noticeable in the trial was that the non-inoculated control groups out of this set was that the plants that had been treated with mural tended to have a larger root system. And you can see that here. Here's a close-up. There was a lot of internal fibrous roots that had developed. And this increase in roots is a plant health benefit resulting from both AIs that are in mural fungicide. We've also observed this plant health effect when it is applied to spray on unrooted cuttings. In this trial, treatments were applied to poinsettias 4 days after stick, and the root evaluations were made 23 days later. You can definitely see some root enhancement here with the treatments compared to the control. So here you have Heritage at 2 ounces. Here's Mural at 4. And then Heritage and Pageant for some comparisons. Now, if you're growing poinsettias up in the regions where there's cooler climates, such as the Northeast or Midwest, you may run into issues with powdery mildew. Initial symptoms begin as small chlorotic spots on the foliage, like you see in this upper picture, but very quickly these spots are covered with the white fluffy colonies of the powdery mildew fungus. While powdery mildew does not require high levels of humidity, anything you can do to increase air circulation will help. If you are in a region where you've had this problem before, it's best to start sprays in October on a 2-week, 3-week interval, and you can go with a Mural, a 711 rotated with palladium, and then something in frac code 3. Here's some data. We do see good control of powdery mildew with the 711 group of fungicides. Now, botrytis is an opportunistic pathogen, and we can see this at any point during production. It often infects damaged tissue and leaves in the lower canopy where the humidity levels are higher, and they may be senescing because of low light or low nutrient levels. So again, anything you can do to maintain good air movement to keep that humidity below 75% will help manage botrytis. It is also good to be on a rotation of fungicides, rotating with Mural and Palladium, both at the 4 to 6 ounce rate, will provide some good control of botrytis as well as the other pathogens that we previously discussed. This is the full list of control options for botrytis. And so early in production, you may start with one of the multi-site fungicide applications. In the middle of production, you may be doing a rotation of some of these in the middle. And then at the end, when you're ready to ship, you can do something like Decree, which is specifically focused just on botrytis. Again, some trial data showing the performance of these products. And I will say that we definitely see some better control with Mural over Heritage when it comes to botrytis control. And so you will see that added in our agronomic programs. We've seen good plant safety with Mural applications, both on leaves and bracts and color. We do suggest adding a little bit, usually 3 to 4 ounces to the spray tank to spread out the spray and minimize any spotting. In this trial, we used 6 ounces, but that's because we were just trying to check it out for phyto purposes. Now moving on to some pest problems. Wanted to talk a little bit about thrips. Thrips can be a problem early in production as well as later in production. When they feed, they scrape that tender plant tissue and they leave these scratchy etch marks on the foliage that you see here. Sprays of Avid, Overture, mainspring and expire can be used to manage your thrips population. If you're going to be using mainspring as a drench later in production, I would just focus on using Avid, Overture, or Expire as a rotation for controlling thrips. Be careful of pylon. This can cause some phyto on poinsettias, particularly when the temperatures are warm, so just be aware of that. This is a trial that was conducted by Dr. Brian Kunkel at University of Delaware, looking at different treatments for control of thrips. These treatments were applied on a 14-day interval. You should be aware that Expire has the same active ingredient, or actually it's composed of two active ingredients. One of them is the same as in Conserve, so it does contain spinosad. So if you're going to be including them in your rotation program, you would want to select one or the other. Now, by far, the most serious problem on poinsettias is going to be whitefly control. And I've included pictures of different types of whitefly, but the one that we really are concerned about is the sweet potato whitefly, or Bonzi tabassi. It is important to know that both B and Q biotypes are still present in the population. So control tactics that target both should be focused. And if populations are not controlled early, they can build up quickly and create some serious problems in production. Since this pest feeds on the undersides of the foliage, control with spray applications can become more difficult as the plants attain more size. Some early trials that we did with mainspring indicated that it worked very well as a spray and a drench on B and Q biotypes. The sprays were applied on a 14-day interval, and we looked at different drench rates. We continued this work with Q biotype, and this time we looked at it on hibiscus, which is another favorite host of whitefly. This trial was conducted by Dr. Lance Osborne from the Apopka Research Station. And he looked at foliar sprays at 6 ounces and drench application at 6 and 8. And I'm sorry, the slide is a bit messed up here. You can see we got, again, very good control with these applications on Q. This trial focused on B biotype, and we looked at different rates and different drench volumes. We also included Altus in as a spray to see how it would compare. This trial was conducted in Florida, where the temperatures are high and the whitefly populations literally go through the roof. If you look at the control check here, we had to stop counting at 200 nymphs per 2 square inches. So it really was an acid test. Again, you can see very good control with the drench applications of mainspring going out 11 weeks and still flatlining, showing that mainspring in IRAC group 28 is an excellent systemic non-neonic option for whitefly control. Now, not all diamides in IRAC group 28 work the same. In this trial on lantana, which also is a good host of whitefly, spray applications of mainspring, Sarissa, and Protea were evaluated for their performance against whitefly. Again, you can see mainspring provided some good control at both the 4 and the 8 ounce rate. And while spray treatments can be effectively used in production to control this pest when plants are small, really once plants gain some size and spray coverage becomes a bit more challenging, the systemic drench applications are needed to provide the long residual control. For best results, we suggest that you apply mainspring 2 to 3 weeks after pinch. And if you're growing something 8-inch or 10-inch pot or larger, definitely wait 3 weeks after pinch. This allows for more root development in the pot, and the more roots that are present, the more active ingredient is picked up and moved up into the canopy to provide that longer residual control. It's also really important to make sure that the drench volume wets 3/4 of the root ball or root zone. This is really important because you really want to get the product where the roots are. And we do provide some suggested drench volumes on our label. Just showing you a picture of root development 3 weeks after pinch. You can see again the roots are in this zone here, a half to 3/4 of the root ball. Now, there's a lot of different types of planting media being used these days, and so it really is very important that you check out your drench volumes to make sure that you are going to be getting your drench volume wetting a half to 3/4 of this root zone. You can see that's where most of the roots are, and you can be sure if you check it out that you're going to get the proper wetting you need. This is really easy to do. You can take your container and add, in this case, this was a 10-inch pot. We were adding 4 ounces of water in small increments to the pot, and we just watched it to see when we began to see some of the water drip from the container. You can also look at the root zone to see if you can see wetting. But with some of the types of media we're using these days, looking at the wetting pattern can be also a bit challenging. So it might be interesting to note that this 10-inch pot took 24 ounces of water before it started to drip out of the bottom of the container. So while systemic insecticides like mainspring can provide the backbone of your whitefly program, it is important to use other products with different modes of action to assist with whitefly control. Pyrethroids have often been used and are still used to knock down adult populations, but we do know that Q is resistant to pyrethroids, so overuse can lead to a shift in the biotype population. In 2005, Jim Bethke did some early work identifying products that were effective on Q biotype, and you can see them here. Avid, Sandmite, Judo also provide some really good control for Q biotype. Additional studies by Scott Ledwig, when he was at Texas A&M, took this further and evaluated the residual control these products provided at different time intervals after application. He did find that Avid provided 95% control of whitefly 8 to 10 days after an application was made. So in 8 days, if a whitefly adult came in and laid eggs, those eggs may have hatched, but they did not go on to complete their life cycle and emerge as an adult. And at 14 days, we were still getting 55% suppression in the population. For Sandmite, this one held well and steady at 70, basically 70% over the 14-day period. And here you see N-star in the untreated control. So it is important to remember that we do have other tools that are useful, particularly when the crop is small and good spray coverage can be achieved. Products like Avid, Sandmite, Rechcigl, Altus are all good options to use as sprays for keeping the adult populations down. There are production facilities that use biocontrols as part of their whitefly management program, and we have found that mainspring can be used effectively with parasitoids like Incarcia and Eretmoceras and predatory mites such as Swirsky without any disruptions. We don't have time in the webinar to go over these trial results, but if anyone would like more information on this, please contact me directly. We have developed the following agronomic program as an example of how to position certain products with different modes of action at times to control key diseases and insect pests on poinsettias. Resistance management is built into this program, and you can see that the targets are here listed on the right. This was built really to be used as a general program, as a general guideline. So for instance, you see the target, here's powdery mildew. If you're growing in the south, you may not have problems with powdery mildew, and you can omit some of these applications in the middle. But oftentimes making an application with some of these broad spectrum fungicides on a 14-day interval can provide some very nice protection of the crop without doing too much spraying. This program can be found on our Greencast site online, and I will provide a reference for you. This is our disclaimer. And this is the reference sites that I mentioned earlier. They're listed there for the poinsettia culture guides, the agronomic program, as well as if our contact information if you need to reach us. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mike Olakowski, who has been monitoring any questions that may have been coming in and see if we can answer any questions.
Thanks everybody for attending today. I don't have any questions or comments on the Q&A button, so thanks for joining. And if you need to reach out, give us a call sometime, check out those links, and thanks for everybody for attending. Everybody enjoy the day, and let's grow a good crop out there. Thanks all.